If you're new here, welcome. What you'll learn in this series are brief but focused examinations of some of the most influential figures throughout history. If you'd like to learn more about other historical figures, check out the series. In today's episode, we look at Zanotipus. Zanotipus was a Stoic philosopher who lived in the 3rd century BC. Very little is known about his life, but what we do know comes from the writings of other philosophers and indirect sources. What we know is that he was a pupil of Diogenes of Babylon, the head of the Stoa, Poikile, and the tutor of Zeno of Citium, the founder of Stoicism. But before looking into his life, let's take a look at his name. Zanotipus was a Greek male given name. It's derived from the two Greek words Zeus and Otis, meaning Zeus is my father. Now, in ancient Greece, it was uncommon for people to have multiple names or to be called by different names depending on the context. For example, Alexander the Great was actually named after his father, King Philip II of Macedon. However, his name was changed to Alexander III when he succeeded his father to the throne. Similarly, Zanotipus may have had other names or been called by other names depending on the context. This is because the name Zanotipus is found in several ancient texts, including the works of Roman poets such as Cicero and Pliny the Younger. In these texts, he is referred to as Zanotipus the Athenian, which suggests that he may have been known by another name in Stoic circles. Unfortunately, we don't know what this name was, but it's possible that it was his original name before he became a Stoic philosopher. So what can we learn about his life? As mentioned, very little is known about his life. What we do know is that he was born in Athens around 334 BCE and died there around 262 BCE. He was a pupil of Diogenes of Babylon, the head of the Stoa Poikile, and the tutor of Zeno of Citium, the founder of Stoicism. However, unlike his teacher and his student, Zanotipus did not write any books. The only surviving texts attributed to him are a few fragments of letters and a single letter, which were discovered in the Oxyrhynchus papyri. These texts suggest that Zanotipus was a prolific writer, but unfortunately none of his works have survived intact. We also know that Zanotipus was highly regarded by his fellow Stoics. According to Cicero, he was one of the most virtuous and wise men of his time, and that he was known for his ability to explain complex philosophical concepts in simple terms. Pliny the Younger also mentions Zanotipus in a letter to his friend Tacitus, referring to him as an old and most excellent philosopher. He also states that Zanotipus was in his late 70s when he visited him in Athens, which would date his birth to around 334 BCE and death to around 262 BCE. One of the main reasons why so little is known about his life is that the Stoics didn't believe in recording their own deeds or those of their close associates. This was in line with their belief in living in accordance with nature and not seeking fame or glory. They believed that the only way to achieve virtue and happiness was to live a simple life free from the distractions of worldly concerns. This is evident in the writings of other Stoic philosophers such as Epictetus, who also came from Greece and lived during the same time period as Zanotipus. Epictetus was a former slave who became one of the most influential Stoic philosophers of all time. His teachings were recorded by his student Arrian, but Epictetus himself never wrote anything down. Similarly, Zeno of Citium, the founder of Stoicism, was born in Greece but spent most of his life in Athens. He too was a prolific writer, but he never wrote about himself or his own life. Instead, he focused his writings on the nature of the universe, the place of humanity in it, and how to live a virtuous and happy life. Another reason why so little is known about Zanotipus is that Athens was not the center of the Stoic movement. Although Zeno of Citium and later Seneca and Marcus Aurelius were born in Greece, the heartland of Stoicism was in Rome. The majority of Stoic philosophers and their followers were Roman citizens, and the Roman Stoics were often more involved in politics and public life than their Greek counterparts. This is not to say that the Greek Stoics were not politically active, but they tended to be more focused on philosophy as a way of life rather than as a tool for political action. Despite the lack of information about his life, we can still learn a lot about Zenon's thought and teachings from the surviving fragments of his work. Unfortunately, the fragments are so few and far between that we can't construct much of a picture of his philosophy. What we do have, however, suggests that he was a proponent of the Stoics' belief in living in accordance with nature. This is evident in a fragment where he says philosophy is essentially a teaching about nature, which encapsulates the Stoics' view that the universe is governed by rational principles and that humans should strive to live in harmony with it. Another important aspect of Stoic thought is the idea of virtue as the sole good. The Stoics believed that the only thing that was truly good was virtue, and everything else was indifferent. This meant that Stoics should not be attached to external things such as wealth, power, or fame, as these things could not bring about true happiness or fulfillment. Zeno's teachings on this subject are reflected in a fragment where he says, "He is rich who has little wants," which highlights the Stoics' emphasis on living a simple life free from the distractions of material possessions. Finally, Stoicism was also a philosophy of resilience and self-control. The Stoics believed that the key to happiness was to accept whatever life threw at them with equanimity and to avoid being disturbed by external events. Zenon's teachings on this subject are evident in a fragment where he says, "When you cease to resist, calm is restored," which encapsulates the Stoics' belief in the importance of accepting and even embracing whatever life throws our way. Unfortunately, as mentioned, these fragments are all that remain of Zanotipus' work, and they don't paint a complete picture of his thought. This is largely due to the fact that the Stoics did not write extensively about themselves or their own lives. Instead, they preferred to focus their writings on their philosophical teachings and the practical application of Stoic principles in everyday life. This is in keeping with the Stoic emphasis on living in accordance with nature and not seeking fame or glory for oneself. However, these fragments do give us some insight into the main tenets of Zeno's thought, namely the importance of living in accordance with nature, the centrality of virtue, and the need for resilience and self-control in the face of adversity. Overall, while we may not know much about the life of Zeno of Athens, what we do know about his thought and teachings provide a valuable glimpse into one of the most influential philosophical traditions of all time.